character, the father and the son, his big brother, were killed immediately along with people of their native people. The native people were killed. So then the little boy ran away, and he was found by a troop which was led by a commissioner.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, a commissioner. So he was mainly using them to find his own priorities, to find his own the he was using them. The commissioner was not doing any good, but the commissioner was সে হচ্ছে land নিতে চাচ্ছিল, তো মানে and the commissioner wanted to take the lands and the facilities, and the commissioner thought যে যা তাদের নিজেদের আছে তো তাদের নিজেদের কাছেই রাখা উচিত,
Hmm.
so and they have to fight for their own rights.
Hmm.
তো ওটার জন্য the commissioner were using the boys.
Hmm.
তো যখন নাকি উপরের থেকে the superior commissioner ordered him not to do so, and to surrender themselves to the UN and the eco and the UN and the
Okay, so
peacekeepers.
the the basic arguments of this movie is that they money during the wartime it is only the women, children, hey,
Yes,
they always get prioritized, hey, within the humanitarian intervention, and they can easily escape the land. And the children, the adult men, they are mostly vulnerable to join the তোমার হচ্ছে military. So it is, I mean, it is a military term, it term as conscription. So the lay people, adult people, they are mostly conscripted within the military. So when they conscripted within the military, when it is something, think about the conscription. You are forced
yes,
to join the military during the wartime. Otherwise, you will be killed, or otherwise, you will lose certain part of your organ. Hey? So think about the rampant cases. You have already noticed from this movie. And the next one is the sexual violence. You have already noticed that a boy, Adu na?
yes, sir.
ওর নাম
Yes,
কি
sir.
আদু?
The boys were, yes, Agu,
Sexually
Agu.
exploited. But think
Yes,
about during wartime. Majority of the time, we are aware that it is only the women that are the targeted of the sexual violence. But during wartime, the male sexual violences, it is also rampant, and specifically young boys, they're mostly targeted. So uh, the the main arguments of this essay, the Charlie Carpenter's essay, mostly emphasized within this movie. That is why I especially encourage you to watch the movie. So those who have not yet watched the movie, I hope that you will watch it by within this week. Yasmin, have you watched the movie? Yasmin, have you watched the movie? Can you hear me? বাকিরা আমাকে শুনছো? Can you hear me?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Yasmin, have you watched the movie? Rise up, দেখেছো? Have you watched it? Okay, no problem. Okay, so who have read the article? Faiza পড়েছো articleটা? Anyone who have read
Sir,
the
I've
article?
read the one with what is gendered about gender-based violence, but
Okay,
I
so
couldn't finish it yet.
have you read this one, the recognizing gender-based violence against civilian men and boys in conflict situations?
No, sir.
Anyone have read it? Okay, no problem. Gender-based violence means any forms of violence which mostly happen because of someone's gender identity. Okay, so when we talk about the gender-based violence, majority of the times when we talk about the gender-based violence means women are the primary victim of the violence. Even think about the UN's definition of gender-based violence during 1993 when UN developed gender-based violence. It incorporated all kinds of incidents, violences, mostly suffer women. But many of us, we are even not aware যে because of males তোমার হচ্ছে সেক্সুয়াল আইডেন্টিটি, হ্যাঁ, মানে হাউ ইট ক্যান তোমার হচ্ছে এই যে lead to gender-based violence against men and boys. Okay, so these article mostly argue that gender-based violence against men, including sexual violence, forced conscription, and sex selective massacre. So the article mostly তোমার হচ্ছে emphasized on three issues, হ্যাঁ, during wartime specifically, and Carpenter argued that মানে these kinds of violence against men, not women, men must be recognized as such and condemned and addressed by civilian protection agencies and proponents of human security agenda in international relations. Clear? Clear সবাই? Kinjulai, clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Okay, so the gender-based violence against men, mostly it includes sexual violence against men, forced conscription. Think about the wartime. Yeah, male are mostly forced to join the military, and the final one is a sex selective massacre. Okay. Okay, so firstly, Carpenter argued that the international efforts. Can you read it out, Kinjulai? International efforts.
Yes, sir. The
International.
international effort, yeah. However, with the real assumption, international effort to address gender-based violence in conflict situation and document and report advocated for and evaluating such effort has so far tend to focus primarily on the kind of the gender-based violence to which women are
exposed. So think about, yes,
exposed.
you know, during the তোমার হচ্ছে war time and during the time of এটার নাম হচ্ছে এই যে massacre, yes, women মানে খুব brutally they tortured, হ্যাঁ, they suffer are various kinds of psychological and physical মানে হচ্ছে torture. But when you talk about the তোমার হচ্ছে gender-based violence during war time or during time of the emergency, yeah, even think about the normal time, male violence against male, violence against men, mostly it is something obscured or it is not something recognized within the development intervention as well as within the তোমার হচ্ছে security intervention. Okay, so the author tried to তোমার হচ্ছে intervene within this gap, and specifically the author specifically highlighted three forms of gender-based violence faced by men and boys in conflict situations. These three are sex selective massacre, forced recruitment, and sexual violence. Okay, so then Ashok, the constructing gender-based violence, it is something we have already discussed, that the whole international agencies, international development bodies, those who have developed the definition of gender-based violence, they have mostly emphasized on the question of women, women's vulnerabilities and so on, and mostly হচ্ছে তারা they obscured the question of male within their discourse. And the author tried to incorporate the male's perspective within the discourse of gender-based violence. Clear, Yasmin? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. এখন আসো, the thing is that এখন we have already talked that three specific areas of gender-based violence against men. So first one is sex selective massacre as gender-based violence. Why during the wartime, why male are mostly targeted? Okay, so it is something different. Majority of the time when we are talking about women question, we are talking about women's vulnerabilities. Think about within modern nation state mechanism, how many তোমার হচ্ছে victims of murder are male or how many of them are female? Think about, apart from the war time, think about the তোমার হচ্ছে normal time. Think about within the Bangladeshi context, not only in the Bangladeshi context, in majority of the তোমার হচ্ছে cases তুমি দেখবা 90% of the murderer victims are mostly male, and males তোমার হচ্ছে victimization, তাদের sufferings are mostly obscured and unrecognized within the academia. Okay, so apart from the normal time, during wartime, think about the male person, they are mostly target of gender-based violence, target of তোমার হচ্ছে massacre. Why men? Can you read it out? এই যে ফারিহা জামান, men are more vulnerable to getting killed. Can you read it out? Fariha?
men are more vulnerable to getting killed. That's a pretty big deal. Getting sick, getting raped, getting attacked are all pretty bad things, but they stay. And they are much more vulnerable to getting
kill
killed
than
than
women. So during wartime, it is mostly the male. They are the victim of the তোমার হচ্ছে massacre. Okay, okay. Then হচ্ছে Tasnim, can you hear us? Tasnim? Tasnim? Raisa, can you hear us? Raisa?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, Raisa, can you read it out more often? এখান থেকে please, more often.
More often than women, young children or the elderly, military age men, and adolescent boys are assumed to be potential combatants and are therefore treated by
Armed forces.
whether engaged in formal battle, in low intensity conflict, or in repression of domestic civilian populations, as though they are legitimate targets of political
violence. So in majority of the conflict areas, conflict zone, it is assumed that the male, they will be the potential combatant, potential enemy, potential, তাই না, potential killer. তোমরা এখন অনেকে you are using the word potential rapist. So it is something like this, যে তোমার হচ্ছে the male, they will be the potential competent following 2 to 3 years later. And মানে during তোমার হচ্ছে I don't know whether you are aware with the Rwandan genocide. We have already discussed in our N355 course. Many of you are present in that class discussion. You are aware যে কিভাবে হচ্ছে মানে এটার নাম কি, এই যে the massacre, genocide, তোমার হচ্ছে operated within the Rwandan তোমার হচ্ছে society. But interesting one thing is that during 1959, when মানে another kinds of তোমার হচ্ছে riots, ethnic conflict happened in Rwanda, and many of them, they মানে they refrained in such a way that, oh my god, why we have not killed them in that time. তো ওই সময় কেন মারি নাই, why মানে we survived them, they became the তোমার হচ্ছে potential, they became the combatant. So if we kill them in that time, they would not be the মানে হচ্ছে potential combatant in later time. So during the war time, it is the male, they are mostly targeted. Think about, and majority of the time they assume that male, they would be the potential combatant, and they should be demolished and they should be annihilated. Clear? Faiza, clear?
Yes, sir.
Faiza?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so এবং think about তোমার হচ্ছে what happened in Rwanda, some Tutsi women were transferred. Okay, so interesting one thing is that তোমার হচ্ছে many তোমার হচ্ছে in many societies, people usually assume, even not only the people, the scholar, even তোমার হচ্ছে the militia, they assume that male, they are mostly carry the ethnicity. It is not the women, it is rather the male, it is rather the man who carry the ethnicity, who carry the identity of a specific group of people. So we need to annihilate those people. Okay, so we can survive these women. These women, they will just conceive our own sperm. During wartime, think about their own mentality. Think about the mentality of the militia. They assume that women, they will just a carrier. They will just conceive. They are not actually the carrier of the identity. They are actually not the carrier of the ethnicity. So women can be survived, but it is not the male who would be survived. So what happened during the Rwandan genocide? Some Tutsi women were transferred as wives to the Hutu genociders after their husbands and children were killed. So think about during the Rwandan genocide, যখন হচ্ছে mostly near about তোমার হচ্ছে huge amount of people, তাই না, তোমার হচ্ছে 8 near about 1 million people বলা হয়, 8 lakh near about, এই যে Tutsi were killed, এবং হচ্ছে massacred, এবং during the massacre, Tutsi women were transferred as wife of Hutu, and they assume that, oh my god, women, they will just conceive their own sperm, and male, they are the carrier, so we need to annihilate the male. So in majority of the cases, they just annihilated the male. Clear? So it is something sex selective killing, sex selective তোমার হচ্ছে massacre. Clear, Yasmin? ক্লিয়ার?
Yes, sir.
ওকে, সো হচ্ছে হ্যাঁ, এই যে দেখো মানে ইন ফিমেল সার্ভাইভার্স রিপোর্টেড বিং টোল্ড দে আর সেফ বিকজ সেক্স হ্যাজ নো এথনিক গ্রুপ, মানে ইট ইজ সামথিং যে তোমার হচ্ছে জাস্ট ক্যান ইউ জাস্ট রিড ইট আউট, এই যে ফ্রম হিয়ার এলিমিনেটিং, এই যে দে আর ফর এলিমিনেটিং, ক্যান ইউ রিড ইট আউট? ইয়াসমিন, এলিমিনেটিং অ্যান এথনিক গ্রুপ from here.
Yes. Eliminating an ethnic group only requires the destruction of male members. Women who simply absorb the ethnicity of those who own them and father the children to whom they give birth can be appropriated as reproductive vessels. Although this explanation would only hold in cases where target groups were delineated according to ethnicity, it does appear salient in some recent cases, such as Rwanda. According to a report from African rights collaborators with the genocidaries, persuaded them to spare women because they did not have an ethnicity. The bad ones were men. And female survivors reported being told they were safe because sex has no ethnic group.
So think about, so we have already discussed it. So think about what actually happened in Rwandan case. So female sex, it was not recognized. They're just the sexual object, nothing else. Male sexual identity is not merely the sexual object. Rather, excuse me. Apologies, sorry. Okay, so হচ্ছে তোমার হচ্ছে male sexual identity is not merely the sexual identity, rather it is the carrier of তোমার হচ্ছে ethnic identity too. So that is why males তোমার হচ্ছে children, they should be annihilated. হ্যাঁ, so during war time মানে এটা শুধুমাত্র it doesn't happen only in Rwanda. Think about it happened during the war time in 1971 in Bangladesh. So আমার হচ্ছে Pakistani army, is a Rommel reports that the Pakistani army initially sought to crush the East Pakistani independence movement by conducting sweeps of young men who would never be seen again. Bodies of youths would be found in fields, floating down rivers or nearby army camps. In Rwanda, where genociders took তোমার হচ্ছে diapers off infants to discover which were boys to be killed. So they have already think about, hey, they took the diapers and they checked whether it is male or female. When they discovered someone as male, they just kicked off and they just killed that boys. And when they discovered it is female, they took it and they took it away with them. Clear? Think about how ferocious it was something. Just because of their sexual identity, boys were annihilated and women, they were just alive and segregated and took away. Faiza, clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so তোমার হচ্ছে author Carpenters argued that we must recognize the sex selective massacre against men and boys during the wartime because it is their sexual identity, হ্যাঁ, তোমার হচ্ছে which lead to the annihilation, হ্যাঁ, within তোমার হচ্ছে certain context. Think about the Rohingya genocide. You will be surprised that the Rohingya population, 48% are the tomar hotche a male and 52% of the female. So think about the majority of the vulnerable people, they were the mostly the male during the tomar hotche tomar conflict time. Among male boys, male children, think about what happened in Rwanda. The children's diapher checked whether he was male or she was female. Okay. Despite তোমার হচ্ছে এই যে তোমার হচ্ছে number of women joined in various guerrilla groups, warrior groups, in several countries. Think about Colombia, think about the Bangladesh Liberation War, even in তোমার হচ্ছে তোমার in other areas. But what actually tomar hocche the common perception about the war that male, they would be the potential combatant. So mostly because they would be the combatant potential combatant, they would be annihilated. Okay, clear shobai? So why mostly women male are the target of sex selective massacre during the wartime? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then হচ্ছে forced recruitment as gender based violence. Forced recruitment, that is means তোমার হচ্ছে conscription. Okay, conscription, we have already, you have already aware with this word. Hey? We have already read the article of Talal Asad, Conscription of Western Civilization. Okay, যাই হোক, conscriptions means মানে to force someone to enter in the তোমার হচ্ছে war. So who will read it out? Conscriptions often. Raisa, can you read it out? Conscriptions often. Raisa?
Conscription often use an issue.
Yeah.
Officially, refugees were not allowed to cross the Afghani border into Pakistan last year. Only vulnerable groups, only women and children. But, in fact, the men were perhaps the most vulnerable, and the women themselves were most concerned about the men who had the risk of being conscripted
To the
to the
Taliban.
Taliban at the time.
So think about that movie, The Beast of No Nation, the same thing. So think about the whole development agenda. Think about whole humanitarian intervention. They have developed their policies, programs in such a way that they will rescue the vulnerable people. So who are the vulnerable? So it is the women, it is the children, they are the vulnerable. And they have forgotten and they didn't recognize the tomar hocche male's vulnerability. So think about what happened during the Afghan war. It was only the women, it was only the children as vulnerable group, they were allowed to cross the border, and male they were not. So when they were tomar hocche forced to stay in that place, they were also forced to join in the military. In Afghanistan cases, the young children, young adult, and young men, they were forced to join in the Taliban. Think about in African context, the majority of the lay people, hey, those who are tomar hocche confined, hey, and failed to flee or escape the place, they are mostly forced to join in the military. Clear? Clear?
Yes, sir.
either হচ্ছে by military or by তোমার হচ্ছে rebel groups, হ্যাঁ তোমার হচ্ছে various kinds of rebel groups. Someone rescued you or someone just তোমার হচ্ছে imprison you and ask you to তোমার হচ্ছে fight, হ্যাঁ, for them. So these kinds of incidents available happen. So in Afghanistan case, the author argued that in majority of the cases, it seems that many male people, hey, they handed over the extortion, চাঁদা দিয়েছে, extortion to the Taliban leaders, hey, or rebel leaders, hey, to desert themselves, hey, to escape from the war places. Clear? Clear? Clear সবাই?
Ji, sir.
Yes.
So,
Yes, sir.
so think about what actually happened. So we mostly obscure the vulnerability of the male. So whenever someone confined within a specific place, they are mostly তারা কি হয়ে যায়, conscripted by the militia groups, or something like this. And try to remind that in majority of the cases, those who escape the war land, it is the male. এবং হচ্ছে think about their vulnerabilities all over the world. The majority of the refugees, it is mostly the male. Then they escape the land and they flee, they escape for another world, and mostly they lost everything. Okay, clear? Okay, now the question is that is forced recruitment violence? এটা কি violence কিনা? Okay, so Sumaya, can you read it out? Involuntary recruit, sir. Sumaya?
Involuntary recruits are coerced
Course,
into
forced বা coerced, yes.
coerced into military service through both actual and threatened violence. Conscientious objectors are harassed even in societies that recognize their right not to serve. Among countries that prosecute draft
penalties vary. Thank you.
Penalties vary
between fines and death penalty. So think about the forced recruitment. If someone denied to join in the military, he is supposed to be punished. it is either by death penalty or by other kinds of fine. So in Iraq, what actually happened following 1991, those who denied to join the military, majority of them, they lost their ears, feet or hands, because they tried to escape the wartime and they denied to join the military. So in majority of the cases, even someone denied to kill someone or denied to join in the military, or denied to do something ascribed, তাদেরকে mostly during the military war time তাদেরকে মেরে ফেলে, mostly they are being killed. Clear? In the USA, such individuals may be fined and imprisoned for up to 5 years. So if any US citizen, they denied to join in the military or denied to so it is something ordered that you should join in the Afghan war. If you denied to join there, you may be fined or imprisoned for up to 5 years. A fact which carries with the risk of male on male sexual violence in prison. And an important thing, we'll discuss it in later, male sexual violence in prison. Okay, so forced recruitment, it is something violent. So if you deny to join in the military, you may would be killed, you may would lose your organ, you may would be imprisoned, or you may would be fined, or you may would need to pay the extortion. Clear? Clear, Shobai?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so however, violent it may be, is forced recruitment gender based? Okay, so forced recruitment, conscription, is it gender based? Faiza, can you read it out? I argue that. Faiza.
Yes, sir.
I argue that from here.
Okay, I argue that it is so in two respects. First, it is gender-based insofar as it is sex-selective. That is, adult men are typically targeted in ways that women, girls, and even younger boys, though this is changing in several theaters, are only to a lesser degree. In the USA, for example, young men are penalized for refusing to register with the Selective Service, foregoing government benefits such as grants for college education. Similarly, Israel, which drafts women as well as men, allows women, but not men, a limited right of conscientious objection. Second, forced recruitment is gender-based insofar as it is justified and naturalized by collectively held assumptions about masculine identity, nationalism, and militarism.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So think about it is something gender-based. So why gender-based? So it is the male who are typically targeted to join the military. So it is mostly not the women. Clear? 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 সবাই clear কিনা? So during wartime, because of your gender identity, because of your gender identity, you are not being treated as vulnerable. That is why you are not allowed to cross the border. You need to be you need to be confined within the war zone. Then either you will be forced to join the military, or you may would be killed, or you may would need to pay the extortion, or you would be imprisoned. Clear? Okay. Then the final one is the sexual violence against males as gender-based violence. I imagine there are quite a lot of cases in which young men are being abused and no one is talking about it. Think about violence against men. It is mostly unrecognized within our society, and no one is talking about it. Especially in conflict situation in certain countries, one does not talk about the abuse of young men. Think about in majority of the war crimes, war crime hearings, majority of times we talk about the rape, we talk about the gender-based violence against women, and we never recognize and we never talk about the violence mostly faced by male. So what kind of violences mostly male face during the war time? First one is the rape and sexual mutilation. So okay, the first one is the rape and sexual mutilation. I don't know whether you are aware during the wartime how তোমার হচ্ছে male they are being recruited, imprisoned, exploited, and sexually mostly exploited. Uh, Perhaps the most prevalent form of sexual violence against men and older boys involves a combination of rapes and sexual mutilation. The ritual মানে হচ্ছে castration of male prisoners and enslavement of adolescent boys along with women for sexual purposes has been a notable feature of warfare throughout the history. So think about the male prisoners enslavement and their castration. Okay. More recently, such crimes appear most likely to take place in detention during times of armed conflict alongside other forms of torture. The 1994 final report of the Commission of Experts, for example, documented numerous cases of sexual assault against men during the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, primarily in detention camps, which acts including castration, circumcision and other forms of sexual mutilation. Think about যে ছেলেদেরকে ধরে ক্যাস্ট্রেশন করে ফেলে, মানে হচ্ছে মানে এটার নাম হচ্ছে they will lose their reproductive, হ্যাঁ তোমার হচ্ছে রাইটস মানে রিপ্রোডাক্টিভ অর্গান। সো তারপর হচ্ছে তাদেরকে মানে সার্কামসাইজ করে ফেলে and other forms of sexual mutilation. In many cases, prisoners are forced to perform sexual acts on the guards and or on other prisoners, and there are reports that some prisoners were forced to bite off the testicles and of other prisoners. One incident involved prisoners being lined up naked with serve women from outside undressed in front of them. If any prisoner had an erection, his penis was cut off. Another ex-detainee told of suffering electric shocks of the scrotum. So think about a naked women, তোমার হচ্ছে তাকে she will be placed in front of the detainee if someone's penis, think about তোমার হচ্ছে as in erection এটাকে মানে মানে এটাকে কি বলবো immediately মানে they cut off. And okay, men may be raped anally in detention or forced to sexually service male guards. এবং এটা হচ্ছে সবচাইতে the rampant one and which is mostly unrecognized. Those who are in prison, mostly they are the victim of তোমার হচ্ছে anal rape. এবং I don't know যে within the Bangladeshi context, even those were the prisoners, and you know the prison system in Bangladesh, it is so infamous for its system, policies and programs. I don't know যে whether you notice the last week's Chief Justice order on life imprisonment. He ordered that the life imprisonment it is something near about 30 years. Can you just imagine? Life imprisonment equivalent to 30 years. So when think about within the Bangladeshi context, the prisoners they are in myriad of prisoners, they are bound to stay within the prison. In other societies, those who are think about the even think about the prisoner, the majority of the prisoner they are the male, mostly more than 90 to 95% of the male. First one. Second one, in majority of the cases in other societies, you will see the prisoner they would be stay outside the prison and they will be treated as prisoner, but they will stay in other sides of the তোমার হচ্ছে prison, and they will be monitored, মানে যেটাতে in terms of in regards of তোমার হচ্ছে low degree of crime, degree of offenses যেটাকে আমরা বলতে পারি আর কি. But in Bangladesh cases, all walks of তোমার হচ্ছে criminals and all walks of people, those who are তোমার হচ্ছে either convicted অথবা alleged, তাদেরকে প্রিজনে নিয়ে যাওয়া হয়। এবং in majority of the cases which is not reported within the Bangladeshi context, I read it from newspapers report that majority of the prisoners even in Bangladeshi prison they raped anally. And I don't know whether you heard about the transgender people of the Bangladesh. I worked during my Dhaka University life in Hili in Dinajpur on transgender people as part of the paper of one of my teacher. What I have found that the majority of the transgender people, those who are living in hilly areas, in Dinajpur areas, they are mostly তোমার হচ্ছে involved in তোমার prostitution. And think about the transgender people, what we revealed from that তোমার হচ্ছে areas that the majority of the transgender people, their life expectancy is maximum 40 to 50 years. Majority of the cases they died because why? Because of তোমার হচ্ছে এই যে think about the prostitution which lead them মানে lead to certain kinds of তোমার হচ্ছে physical problems. And think about the transgender people, majority of them, yeah, they have problems with তোমার হচ্ছে I don't know you are aware with the kinds of হ্যাঁ তোমার হচ্ছে colon related problems. So majority of the transgender people, those who are involved in prostitution, হ্যাঁ, think about mostly they are being raped. Yeah, think about the তোমার হচ্ছে anal sex. It is something mostly it is something one kind of rape. And those who are the victim of this kind of even prostitution, after certain period of time they don't get enough তোমার হচ্ছে even life. Many various kinds of disease they are mostly affected by. Clear? Faiza?
Yes, sir.
Clear? Raisa, clear?
Yes, sir.
So during the wartime and during those who are the even specifically those who are in detention camp, men, young boys, adult boys, mostly they raped anally. Okay? Clear? And many cases of male rape have also been reported in the war of Sierra Leone. And you have already noticed from the, I especially encouraged you to watch the movie because in that movie you have already watched the how the male, adolescent male, they are the targeted of sexual violence by the many tomar hocche male warriors, by the guards, by the blah blah blah. The human rights community has been slow to level such violence against males as sexual violence specifically. তোমার হচ্ছে, for example, Jones and Del Toto have observed that although sexual mutilation of men was reported in the context of the Bosnian concentration camps, it has not been prosecuted as rape or sexual violence in the তোমার হচ্ছে Hague Tribunal. Clear? Clear? So the male, those who have lost their sexual organ, those who sexually তোমার হচ্ছে persecuted, raped anally, those who lost their sexual even organ, everything, none of these kinds of violence, it was not recognized even within the court discussion. Clear? Clear?
Yes, sir.
So the author argued that this needs to be changed and recognizing that men are also victims as well as the main perpetrators, okay, of sexual violence. Okay? Clear? And think about within the Bangladeshi context, we are talking about women's rape, women's victimizations. That is obvious. I don't know whether you are aware, even think about the male, the sexual violence against male, that is also rampant and that is mostly unrecognized. Even male, they cannot even think about, they cannot even share with another people, and those who are mostly the victim of these kinds of incidents. I recently noticed a case. One of my friends working on tomar child abuse in Qawmi madrasas and in other tomar residential institutions, he discovered a boys. Oh my God, horrific. If you go through the tomar incidents, normally these kinds of boys they faced. So sexual violence against male, it is mostly unrecognized within our own society too. Okay? Okay? Faiza, clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Civilian man forced to rape. Okay, during wartime, what actually happened? Another common form of sexual violence to which men have been exposed in time of war, one that is seldom recognized as such and for which a suitable level has not even been invented. So in Bosnia, what happened? There were cases of fathers and sons detained together and forced to gunpoint to anally rape each other. So think about someone imprisoned in the detention camp, and both think about the fathers and sons. Think about they detained together, forced at gunpoint to anally rape each other. Otherwise, you will be killed. Okay, so think about what actually happened in Bosnian War in 1994-93. Other testimonies from the Balkans referred to fathers and brothers forced to rape their female relatives. In other wartime contexts, such as the occupation of Nanking during the World War II in China and more recent violence in Africa and South Asia, fathers have been forced to rape their daughters, brothers to rape their sisters, and sons to rape their mothers in front of the soldiers. Either you will refuse incest or you will be killed. So think about these kinds of tomar hoche incidents, mostly unrecognized. Okay. And tomar hoche some many
স্যার
হ্যাঁ
আই হ্যাভ
বলো
আ কোয়েশ্চেন
হ্যাঁ বলো
আচ্ছা স্যার সোলজার্সরা যে এসব করে
হ্যাঁ
মানে ওদের মেন্টালিটি কেমন যে ওরা এরকম করতেছে
oh my god না মানে that is simple. Think about the war time, what actually happened. This is the war, that is why this is war. Okay, and clear. And majority of the time, that is why we're just asking that these kinds of incidents, it is mostly unrecognized. Okay, so think about the father forced to rape his own son or daughter, brother. Then think about what kinds of humiliation. Think about this kind of humiliation. So this kind of humiliation and so within so some may argue that it is incongruous to claim that men forced to rape family members are victims rather than perpetrators of rape, suggesting that only the passive partner in a sexual assault can be conceptualized as a victim, regardless of elements of coercion involved. So it is not something. So think about the people, think about the fathers, brothers, so how they are being used, passive agents. So these kinds of incidents not এটা হচ্ছে mostly unrecognized. Secondary victimization, rape of women as psychological torture for men. So think about what happened. So think about এই কেসটা, just read this out from Sierra Leone case. Who will read it out? অর্ক, আচ্ছা তুমি অর্ক? অর্ক নেই? Okay, Preeti, can you read it out? They gathered 5 young. Yes, please. Preeti. Hi, Preeti.
Yes, sir.
Hi.
They gathered 5 young girls together, including my 15-year-old daughter, and put them in the back room. One of them opened the door and asked who the fathers of the girls were. One of them took us and lined us up right in front of the bed and said, "Don't you want to see what we do to your daughters?" We begged them to leave them alone, but they said, "If you continue to talk, we will burn this house and kill every one of you." A rebel had his gun pointed at us the whole time, and there were 2 more at the door. My daughter was crying, but they covered her mouth and told her to shut up.
So think about, so from a gender-based
স্যার
violence
এরকম
perspective.
একটা ইনসিডেন্ট তো মানে কিছুদিন আগেও হয়েছে চিটাগং এর সাইডে
So in majority of the cases, the father or the brother or even the husband, they are forced to presence in তোমার হচ্ছে rape incidents, rape crimes. So তাদেরকে ধরে বেঁধে নিয়ে আসা হয়।
দিস ইজ রিয়েলি সিক
Oof. So think about the male psychology. So think about the father's psychology. His daughter is being raped. Think about the husband, his wife is being raped. What kind of তোমার হচ্ছে pressure, psychological. Think about how it will shape and reshape the reality of that person. Think about when someone's the most favorable one being raped. Think about we are talking about the তোমার হচ্ছে rape, we are talking about the murder of women, but think about what will happen in তোমার হচ্ছে male psychology, the male relative psychology. Think about we are talking about the rape of women, but we have forgotten what will happen in her husband's life. So think about ওই ছেলেটার লাইফটা think about whole psychology mostly obscured within our own literature. Okay. So the literature on sexual violence against women has often emphasized the assault of women as a means to communicate messages to enemy men, but there has been very little specific effort to recognize the trauma of such atrocity for the male relatives of the victims. এইখানে একটা আছে দেখো case, another case. Just as women, who will read it out? Preeti, can you read it out again? Just as women are deeply
Just as women are deeply harmed by the loss of male relatives in time of war, a point often noted in the gender and armed conflict literature, and just as parents may be victimized by watching their children suffer, the psychological impact for an adult man of watching a female relative raped and or killed can be understood itself as a form of secondary torture, stemming from the manipulation of gender-based roles and identities as a form of psychological warfare.
So think about this. So this kind of এই যে এখানে another one is already argued that the female rape survivors, it is not the rape itself but the social stigmatization in the aftermath of the that constitutes the deepest trauma, to the extent that men's experience of these can be validated and psychosocial support provided. It may be possible to alleviate those side effects, encourage more progressive constructions of rape survivors, and promote forced atrocity healing among rape victims and male family members. So it is really important. So women, they are the victims. So think about when women are the victims, how it reshaped the trauma, how it reshaped even it reshaped the psychology of the of their male partner, male family member. So the author urged the international তোমার হচ্ছে organizations, development agencies that you also need to draw attention on the male partners or male survivors, how they will interact and encounter such kinds of তোমার হচ্ছে problems. Clear? Faiza, clear? Faiza?
Yes, sir.
So from this article, the author mainly argued that the way we conceptualize the idea of gender-based violence, it is something, তোমার হচ্ছে, it is something not well defined, because it mostly unrecognized the gender-based violence against male. So what kinds of gender-based violence against male? It is তোমার হচ্ছে sex selective massacre, what we have noticed from Bangladeshi experience, from Rwandan experience. These are the male, they are mostly targeted during the wartime, because they assume that male are the carrier and they will be the potential combatant. That is why mostly they are being তোমার হচ্ছে persecuted during the wartime mostly. The second one is the forced তোমার হচ্ছে conscription, যেটাকে আমরা বলছি forced conscription within the military. Male are mostly forced to join in the military, otherwise either they killed or persecuted or punished or they lost their organ. Okay, and the finally one is the তোমার হচ্ছে sexual violence male normally face during the wartime. The first one is mostly তারা হচ্ছে anally raped, they may lose their তোমার হচ্ছে sexual organ, তারপর হচ্ছে forced to rape each other at gunpoint. So think about what kinds of, and mostly the so these kinds of তোমার হচ্ছে violences they face, and which are mostly unrecognized within the development discourse as well as gender discourse. Thank you so much. Any question from anyone else? Faiza, বুঝেছো সবাই? ইয়াসমিন, ক্লিয়ার?
জি স্যার।
Yes, sir. But sir,
হ্যাঁ,
মানে মিলিটারির মধ্যে কি কোনো হিউম্যানিটি কোনো কিছু নাই?
war
কখনো
is
কি
war.
থাকে না?
So
আমরা স্যার প্রত্যেকটা ওয়ারের সময়ই দেখি এই জিনিসগুলো হচ্ছে।
war is full of yes তোমার হচ্ছে ethical landscape থাকে, could be ethical non ethical সবাই যে একদম, but in majority of the cases we need to draw attention within these kinds of incidents. So when something happened, it is not only the war time, think about the তোমার হচ্ছে normal time, মেলরা কি sexually violated হয় না? Mostly unrecognized আমাদের সোসাইটিতে male sexual violence, mostly unrecognized. Clear, Yasmin?
স্যার ভেরি ডিপ্রেসিং ক্লাস। আজকের ক্লাসটা খুবই ডিপ্রেসিং ছিল।
But this is the reality. We need to work on it. We need to recognize this thing, and we need to incorporate these kinds of narratives into our development projects. Within our development projects, we always draw attention to the question of the men, question of the women, question of the children. They are as vulnerable. We never talk about the vulnerabilities of the male people. Never ever. আমি জানি না, আমি তো ওই যে রিসেন্ট মানে আই ওয়ার্কড ইন রোহিঙ্গা ক্যাম্প তোমার ফর 1 week, নট টু মাচ। I stayed there, মানে I visited 2 to 3 camps, surprised to see the vulnerabilities of the male. Oh my god, মানে what kinds of atrocities they faced. Oh my god, can't imagine, can't imagine. Okay, so that is why I encouraged you to read this article. এটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট একটা আর্টিকেল না? ক্লিয়ার ইয়াসমিন?
স্যার এই আর্টিকেলটা পড়ে তো পুরো ট্রমাটাইজড।
So you should not be the traumatized, rather you need to work on it. You need to address the issue within the society, the male sexual violence that should be recognized within our society, within our তোমার হচ্ছে gender based violence vocabulary. We need to address the issue because mostly think about, মানে আমি যেদিন থেকে when I noticed that the life expectancy of the transgender people মানে এটা dramatically less than the মানে মেল এন্ড ফিমেল অফ বাংলাদেশি সিটিজেন। এটাই তো, think about it, oh my god, how traumatic is it? Think about the majority of the transgender people of the Bangladeshi society, তাই না? They suffer myriad kinds of disease, anal diseases such as তোমার হচ্ছে যে colon related problem, anal fissure, মানে other kinds of, I don't know যে তোমাদের মধ্যে যারা মানে I don't know যে মানে এটা যে কি ভয়ঙ্কর মানে kinds of problems, মানে such kinds of problems often lead to the cancer. মানে anal related কোনো problem দেখা দিলে after certain years it lead to the cancer. তুমি দেখবা যে those who মানে often face anal fissure or other kinds of diseases, it often lead to the cancer. That is why majority of them তারা কিন্তু অল্প বয়সে মারা যায়, transgender people গুলো বাংলাদেশের, because majority of them they are মানে in prostitution industry and which lead to them তোমার হচ্ছে lower life expectancy. Clear, Raisa?
জি স্যার।
এবং think about, so this is the last decision, think about in their everyday life how they encountered such kinds of rape. Not only the transgender people, the male people, those who encounter such kinds of তোমার হচ্ছে violence. Clear, Kinjulai?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay, so thank you so much. মানে এই জন্য I don't know যে তোমরা I don't know যে কেন why you are intentionally missing the classes, I don't know. Many of you are assuming this class is not too much important. মানে what I have noticed, many of you মানে আমি তো দেখছি যে অনেকের মধ্যে you don't have any interest on the issue. দেখো, it looks odd, only 9 of you are just মানে here. Okay, acha, any question, Jahara, any question?
Sir, I wanted to talk to you about the
Okay, ethnography. Okay, no problem, we'll talk it. Okay, are any issue from anyone else? So clear what is gender-based violence?
yes, sir.
Okay, another article I have forwarded, but we had not enough time. I will encourage you to read that one too. Those who have interest and those who will work on gender in your future life, I will also encourage you to read that article. Okay, really important one. Okay, so সবাই দেখে নিও, সবাই ভালো থেকো, thank you so much. Next class আমরা we will discuss about the তোমার হচ্ছে political economy of the violence, what will happen. So political economy of the violence, okay, when someone normally the victim of the violence, what will happen in their life. Thank you, সবাই ভালো থেকো, টাটা।
থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার, টেক
জাহারা
কেয়ার।
থেকো, জাহারা ছাড়া সবাই চলে যেও। হ্যাঁ, thank you. Hi, Zahra.
Ji, sir.
Okay, so the thing is that সেটা হচ্ছে